Os sócios da Balaclava, Dota e Fará, fizeram uma entrevista com a Michelle Cable, que é uma empresária e booker norte-americana, dona da agência Panache. Ela conta como foi começar a trabalhar com artistas como Mac DeMarco, Ty Segall e Bikini Kill. Falou também sobre a sua relação com o Brasil, sobre ser uma referência feminina nesse mercado, sobre as logísticas por trás das grandes turnês e sobre o cenário pós-pandemia para os shows.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for joining us at Balaclava Digital. I want to know first how you're doing. If you want to introduce yourself, it's fine.
Cool. My name's Michelle Cable, and I run a company called Panache. It's a management and booking agency, and it's based in LA currently. And I'm doing okay, all things considered, during a quarantine. Been inside for like 7 months.
Yeah. I can't even think about like a start. If not, like, how did 2020 change your year?
Yeah, I mean, I could not have imagined being in a situation that we're all in. I remember when this was all starting to kind of like be in the news, Mac DeMarco, who, I know you guys are familiar with and I work with, we were supposed to have a tour in Asia, and it was this big dilemma of, should we go to Asia still? Should we do this Japan, China tour? And then I was supposed to go to South by Southwest and speak on a panel, and that seemed kind of a little risky. And then all of a sudden, South by got canceled. We definitely canceled the Asian tour, and then everything just was canceled. It's like almost, who knows how, far into the future everything will be canceled. So it definitely changed the pace of what was happening in my life for 2020. And for me personally too, I just recently became a mom, about 16 months ago. I have a son, and I had just started getting into, a territory of having outside help. We had just hired a nanny part-time we'd only had her for a few weeks. And so when this all started, we furloughed her as well. We stopped having her employed. And so it's been a little crazy.
Yeah.
Work and a child at home. But it's been also, a beautiful thing. But yeah, it's definitely not the year I planned. And I don't know if 2021 will be the year I'm planning either. No one does.
And how are the artists handling that? Like, have been in touch with them frequently? Like, have they been managed to be like doing other stuff besides music, or doing a lot of live concerts on the internet?
Yeah, it depends on the artist. So Panache has, as you guys know, but for everyone listening, so Panache has a booking agency that books live tours, and then I also have a management company. So I was really fortunate to have a management company that I can focus more on, because right now the idea of tours for any kind of live show happening is so indefinite. So I'd say most of the booking agency artists are kind of just taking a break and focusing on records and recording and other projects. A few artists have done some streaming stuff. The OCs did a stream with Levitation Music Fest, and Ty Segall did something with this venue, Zebulon, a while ago. But most of the artists I work with have kind of just been working on projects and staying busy. If this continues into 2021, for a really long time, we'll see maybe more artists will do streams. For the management side of things, though, I've been really busy. I started managing King Gizzard worldwide, and I've been working with them for a long time in North America. But so we have had a lot of new things that we're rolling out and kind of been restructuring a lot of stuff, which has been exciting. So that's kept me really busy. I took on a new management client named Jess Cornelius, who's from New Zealand, but she lives in the US. And then I also just started managing the Murlocs from Australia, who share members with King Gizzard. And then a lot of the artists I work with, like Mac has been doing some recording at home and working on smaller projects, but just enjoying the time off. And a Brazilian artist I manage, Rodrigo Amarante, he has been in the studio and finishing up projects too. So I've been really busy, but it's been not really live show oriented. And I think there's a lot of things that artists have been working on or put on the back burner, but they wanted to work on that they're focusing on now because of the pandemic. Like someone like Ty Segall has been getting really creative with doing, different merch stuff. And he has a lot of different projects that are releasing records still, but he's been doing some sort of fun, DJ stuff at home. from his house. And, you know, I think people are getting creative as they get a little zany at home or in their studios.
And to start from the beginning, like so people can understand the context, like how did Panache started?
Well, so I'm from a really small town in Northern California, a town called Eureka, California, in the middle of the redwoods in this county called Humboldt. But it's a really isolated area. There's just like one highway that goes through it, and it's you know, the town I grew up in had only like 10,000 people in it, and so I was pretty bored by the time I got to high school age, and I was a big fan of music, and I loved to write. I was really into creative writing at the time, and so I kind of decided I'd start a zine when I was probably about 14 or 15. And I think it didn't come out till I was 16, but it was called Panache. And I interviewed a bunch of local bands and did weird food reviews, bathroom reviews. You know, we had like a singles, you know, column in there. And, you know, it was pretty strange, but fun. And, you know, we didn't just.
For how long?
Musicians. I did that. So I did that from when I was 16. I probably put out about, I think it was almost 30 issues, and it was in print. So it was like a fanzine that had 400 copies, and eventually it became 40,000 copies. But I did that for probably like a full decade on and off. But that kind of that was like my foray that was my start into the music industry, really, because I would go to shows when I was 16 at like bars and like, you know, interview bands. I got to know a lot of musicians from San Francisco and all over the country that way. And when I started doing the magazine, I would have these release parties where I would throw a party at this venue, the Vista, which was a seafood restaurant that was cool. It was like by the sea, had seafood on the menu, and then also had shows in the back. Like I saw the White Stripes there, played to like, you know, 100 people, you know, like a lot of smaller bands played there, but then a lot of bigger bands played there too. But anyways, when I started doing the magazine release shows, I started getting into promoting shows, and that's kind of how I became a concert promoter too. And so I did concert promotion and the zine, and then that eventually led to me starting a booking agency. But I probably did the zine in Eureka for like 5 years, and then I moved to San Francisco. And then I was in San Francisco for 4 years, still doing the zine, but also promoting shows. And when I was in San Francisco, that's when I started a booking agency, booking tours for bands all over the country. And I kind of took the network of people I'd met through the zine and started having them help me put on shows everywhere. And this is all like you know, people really relying on the internet. So it was a lot of phone calls and, you know, writing down dates in notebooks, bands getting to venues, not knowing if the show is still happening because it might've been canceled. And but I did that, and I would go on the road with bands too. And I started tour managing bands. So through doing the zine, it kind of grew into me learning how to do a bunch of different aspects of the music industry. I went on tour a lot so I could see all the venues across the country. And, you know, growing up in a small town and then moving to a place like San Francisco, I just really liked the idea of expanding my world. And so traveling was a really big thing for me. And so it was cool to go all over the country and see all the venues. And I think it really helps when you're working in the music industry to kind of know what the bands you work with are experiencing. Day in, day out. It gives you some perspective of what you're introducing them to.
Yeah, that's really cool. I guess like for me and Raphael, in a way, having a band was that kind of perspective, like to be in a band and know their issues and the day-to-day situation. Yeah,
you get inside their psyche. And, you know, I feel like as a booking agent, knowing what you're doing when you put a band on the road and knowing kind of what the venue is like is important, because it shouldn't just be about money or the bottom line. You know, it should be about the best venue, the best sound, the places that people are comfortable going to, you know, clubs that are, you know, diverse and welcoming. And so being on the road, I kind of knew what I was putting artists into. And I think develop strategies on like which venues or which promoters I liked. And people treat you differently if you've met them in person. You know, we've all met. And so that's, you know, like really cool and fun. And I used to do a lot more traveling up until a couple of years ago, you know, about the time I started a family and stuff. But it was, you know, it was a really great part of my life where I kind of just started traveling all over the road. And then that became traveling all over various countries as well. And, you know, and just kind of connecting all the dots. But then kind of a big change that happened for me is So when I was doing the magazine, probably like early 2000, I think 2004 or 2005, I was tour managing and I was in a really bad car accident that had, I don't know if you guys knew about that, but
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so I was in a really bad car accident with a band from Japan named DMBQ, and I was tour managing them, and someone else, I wasn't driving, I was just in the passenger seat navigating, but someone else hit us, and it wasn't our fault, but it was a really tragic accident, and there was a fatality. My friend, this drummer named China, passed away. She played in Shona Knife too. But that was, terrible, and because it was, like I was on the road with them, and she was a good friend of mine, and it's probably one of the worst things that you could ever imagine happening to a band you work with and a band that you're on tour with. And so that created a big shift for me in how I did things. And I kind of after that, I put the magazine on hold and just focused on the touring aspect of things, because physically I'd broken my back and neck and had a lot of healing to do. And so doing the work of, when I would get the magazine printed, there would be 2,000 pounds, like literally a ton of magazines being delivered to my doorstep. Yeah. And, when I'd broken my back and had to recuperate. So I just sort of, focused on what I could do on my laptop. And so then I just shifted to the booking agency aspect of it. And, and I also need just like emotional healing from losing my friend too. And that was like a simpler thing to do. And so that led to me, kind of my primary focus was the booking agency. And then eventually I started helping artists with management too, because just through working with artists that are pretty DIY and are doing things themselves, I kind of just started helping them with all aspects of their career, and then realized that I enjoyed that part of it too. And so that led to the management aspect of the company as well. So, it's interesting when you work in this world, as you guys know from being in bands and then doing this, is you do one thing and then you maybe realize, oh, I like this, or I can do this well too. And, it kind of is always evolving, which keeps it interesting. And I think during this pandemic too, it's kind of a time where people can kind of be creative and try to think outside the box and do other things, since we all aren't, going, boom, boom, boom all the time with shows and everything. There's like this slow, pause right now where we can kind of get more creative and do things that are still in the music industry, but not the norm that we were used to.
So you didn't have any, so you didn't graduate in music business, or like, did you take any courses or?
Nope. very.
You learn by yourself, or like, do you have any one as a reference to you? Like,
yeah. It was very DIY. I got so into doing the music zine, the fanzine, when I was a kid, when I was still in high school, I ended up just homeschooling, graduated early, and then just focused on the music industry, which was fun. And then I had one internship, I think, where I interned at another booking agency for a day, and then they fired me.
What have you done to be fired on the first day?
They fired me because they thought I wanted to be a booking agent, and which is true, but I guess I was too hungry or ambitious or something. I don't know. So anyways, I went there once, did like Google. There was no Google then. It was like MapQuesting, Yahoo MapQuesting directions, I think, for a Peaches tour of like how Peaches could get from like Ohio to Michigan, and I did that. And then the next day, the girl who had gotten me the internship was just like, I'm sorry, but they don't want you in the office.
Oh yeah.
So I was sent home, after that first day. And then I just kind of used my resources and started doing my own thing. And just kind of taught myself along the way. And, I think asking questions and just really throwing myself out there, like into it, is really how I learned a lot. Yeah. But it's interesting because Mac, DeMarco and I have done we used to do a lot of, when we were in New York together, we did a few college classes at NYU and other schools talking about the music industry, and both of us didn't go to school for business.
That's awesome.
So, but kids should stay in school, but it's also good to definitely like immerse yourself while you're doing that, and try out things. You learn. Yeah. I learned a lot from trial and error. And I was lucky because I'm motivated and had a good head on my shoulders, and I just kind of always wanted to further my knowledge of certain things and be stimulated. So I didn't kind of get trapped in feeling too comfortable in one area.
And like you end up working with a bunch of garage bands, like a garage rock bands. So how did it came up with like was it intentional? Like I want to have like a roster that sounds like this, or just like it was the scene that you used to, like the concerts that you used to attend?
Yeah, I would say it was more environmentally, like what I was surrounded by was a lot of rock and roll and garage rock music. The venue I mentioned when I was, 15 or 16, I think some of the, like one of the first shows I saw when I was 14 was that band At the Drive-In at this venue, the Vista. And I saw Turbo Negro when I was like 15 at a venue that Hefe from NoFX owned. And I always, I always loved music, but I loved a lot of music that wasn't, punk. I was really into Britpop, for instance, like Pulp, Jarvis Cocker and Blur, and I liked a lot of soul music too. So I'd say what I listened to, in addition to what I also watched, was very different and diverse. But what was coming through the town I lived in was a lot of rock and roll or like noise bands, a lot of psychedelic music. And I was fortunate enough where the kind of the scene of people that I introduced the magazine to and the people that really became part of this community that I helped create and grow were all into, Flaming Lips and other, like psych bands and, and weirder rock bands. And so it was cool because I became part of this scene and most of the people were older too, they're probably like 5 or 7 years older than me. So I was kind of this strange, really excited 15, 16-year-old going to shows and being like, can I interview your band? And I think people didn't know what to make of it at first. I think a lot of people thought I was, I think people were kind of skeptical at first of like what I was doing. And then they were like, oh, she's really serious about this. And so, I just started getting really involved with all these people and they became really good friends. I'm still friends with, a lot of the bands that I interviewed when I was 16 or 17. And some of those musicians are some of the best musicians, I feel like I know, but it's unfortunate because a lot of them never really played outside of the town I grew up into. But I would book them to open up for bands that I booked. Like, so when I would book a bigger band touring through, I would book my friend's local band. And that was a cool way of kind of, exposing them to new people too. And I started doing like small little music festivals too. We had a festival that we did for several years called Bummer Fest that we did for a long time in a veterans hall basement. But yeah, but I feel like the scene of what was around me, it was really a lot of punk and garage. And also those were like people that I was really interested in hearing about their lives. When you grow up in a really isolated town, I was in the middle of this redwood forest with not a lot of new interactions. For me, going to see a band on the weekend and then getting to interview them and then maybe even having them, so a lot of times they'd even spend the night at my house. And after I interview them, which is kind of funny to think about because I was like 17 or 16 and these rock bands would be staying at my house. But my mom, she was fine with it, seemed okay with it. But, it exposed me to so much diversity and it was really cool. And I was so hungry for that. I mean, I think back now of how many concerts I would go to. And I remember when I would go from where I grew up in Eureka to San Francisco and see concerts too and see bigger shows at the Fillmore, that venue. And I remember when I was like 16 meeting this girl and she told me she'd seen 500 shows. And I was so impressed that she'd been to 500 shows. And now, I feel like in 1 year, I've sometimes seen 500 shows. Not any time recently now, but it was that vitality and that energy that I got from going to live concerts and meeting people was so cool. And it really expanded me as, my world as like a human being and as this young, impressionable, teenager too. So I like that of punk rock music. And also I think for the way I kind of dove into the music scene, the punk world made the most sense, kind of not having really any background and doing it yourself, that seemed the most welcoming to me too.
Yeah. Cool.
So him. So you were big, and you had enough scene. And how you reach that and keep the control of the whole operation? Had like the 2 offices going on, and how many employees you have today?
Yeah. So yeah, I started in San Francisco, and then when I moved to New York, I still had an employee in San Francisco, and she, her name was Annie. She was a booking agent. She booked the OCs in the beginning, and she used to work with Jay Reatard in a lot of bands. Jay was never on the roster, but when she worked at another company, and but she was a little older than me, probably like a decade older than me, and Annie has since recently passed from a battle of breast cancer a few years ago. But she was an amazing woman, but she kind of helped motivate me to kind of expand what I was doing. And she offered to, you know, be an agent and shared some of her knowledge. And so kind of her experience allowed me to expand the roster. And she was on the West Coast. And when I moved to New York, I was on the East Coast. And so, you know, like it was just, you know, a lot of communication, open communication led to being able to operate in both places. And then, you know, when I would organize events at South by Southwest, we would get all of our bands to come together, which was so celebratory and like a really cool way to kind of be like, oh, these are the people we're working with. And this is, you know, like what this is all about. I mean, South by Southwest used to be, you know, like such a fun, monumental moment. I think we used to have like, you know, we're always been a small agency, but sometimes we have like 21 bands there, and some of them would play 15 or 16 times in a day. We started doing these boat shows too, where people could just like, you know, it was like, drink all you want on a boat cruise and party. But it was a really cool way to kind of like see all the people that we work with, all the artists and all the staff in one place. And it kind of tied the year together. But then when I moved to New York, actually one of the people I met at South by when I was a lot younger, he wanted to be an agent. And so he flew from Austin and moved to New York, this guy, Jesse, and interned with me and eventually became a booking agent. And he actually, I think, was my first other booking agent. But you know, I've always had employees kind of all over the country. Like currently, to answer your question about currently, the company is pretty small, especially because we kind of downsized a little bit because of the pandemic too. But even before the pandemic, you know, the booking agency is just me and another agent named Meredith Frazier, who just moved to Texas from New Orleans. But she books Aldous Harding, La Luz, Yves Jarvis, Home Shake, and you know, she has a really great roster. But she's in Texas, and then I you know, had an assistant in LA, and then I have a management assistant, Sarah, who's in Detroit right now, in Michigan. And right, like pre-pandemic, I was going to expand the LA office more, since LA is kind of like the home base. That's where I've been for the last 5 years or so, and that's where most of the management clients. But then, like right before the pandemic, I was going to expand and hire someone else, but then, you know, stuff.
Yeah.
Right now, it's really like we're, you know, one other, you know, I kind of have another assistant.
How many roster management and booking?
Roster about bands now, and you know, don't man that I work with, Bikini Kill, and then let's see, we have Goal, King Gizzard, Jess Cornelius, Rodrigo Amarante, and then I just signed the Murloc. So now I believe we have 6, and that's probably going to be more of the focus as the show, you know, the immediate future of shows is kind of up in the air right now.
And like we can see that nowadays there are several women in booking agencies everywhere, but like, how was that when you started? Did you suffer any kind of like a preconception? Like,
yeah, I feel like in the music, you know, the music industry in general as a whole is pretty male dominated, and there's not a lot of diversity. That's changing. There's definitely more equity happening when it comes to genders, but I think when you look at women-owned booking agencies, there's only in the U.S. there's only a few, like a couple, and when you look at female-owned companies in the music industry in general, I mean, I was talking to someone else the other day about how there's barely any female-owned music record labels. You know, I rarely come across that, and you know, it's unfortunate. I think it needs to change. I found like, I've always found that there's a lot of female run publicity companies in the US. And I think the booking agency thing is starting to change. And I've bonded with a lot of female managers, which is great. And, but a lot of them run their own like independent companies. But I feel like when I started out, you know, and still to this day, you have to kind of tackle a lot of hurdles. And even when I first started the zine, you know, when I was 14 or 15, you know, going on 16, I think everyone thought I wanted to interview the bands because I wanted to hook up with their boyfriends, you know, and I had no interest in any of that. I just was really eager and, you know, like, I like your band. Like, I want to put you in, you know, my zine and interview you. But I like was so professional and like serious about it. But I think in the beginning, I learned that later on people were skeptical because they thought I was just doing it as, you know, like, you know,
like a fan or
as a fan girl or something, you know, and you know, and I was a fan of music, but my intentions were to cover and interview and, you know, and like, and kind of like spread the, you know, like spread the word about these musicians and also form a community. But, you know, over the years, definitely I have, you know, experienced a lot of, you know, like assumptions or, you know, you potentially have people say, you know, like, well, you should definitely hire a man over a woman in that position. But fortunately, I feel like all the people I work with have always really wanted to kind of like help women and are feminists. You know, someone like Mac has always wanted to choose a female over a male. And when we're looking to hire someone as part of his team, you know, if they can do the same job, you know, he's always been like, well, let's pick the woman. And I not really intentionally kind of ended up with an all female, you know, employee, you know, group. You know, when we had more employees, you know, like I had it was all female agents. I think when the most recent, like before the pandemic, you know, like we had 3 female agents, but then we lost one right before the pandemic. And then when Annie was here, and I think all my assistants in the recent years have been women, you know, and that wasn't intentional. It just kind of became what made the most sense, and you know, and people that really connected with what we're doing. And you know, and I've always tried to work with strong female artists and musicians. And I feel like on the management roster, a lot of the bands I started managing first were men, but now I'm trying to expand that into like welcoming more women on the management roster as well when I find the right artists too. So I'm really excited to have Jess on there. But I'm always trying to encourage other women to just get out there and start, you know, their own thing too, and not be afraid to do that. But you know, you definitely, you know, you have to work harder and you have to be, you know, more confident, and it's easy to get cut down by people doubting you. And it's surprising sometimes what you hear people say still, but you know, I've always tried to persevere. And I always think that, you know, like even as a woman that I can kind of definitely do as good of a job as a man, but I feel like also sometimes, you know, just like with my energy and my understanding of things and my understanding of the artists I work with, I do a better job than a lot of, you know, men that would have been in those roles.
Sure. And like considering when you choose like a new band on the roster, do you take this, do you put on a weight, like, so now I'm gonna choose like a different gender or like,
yeah, I feel like
diversity,
I feel like now especially it's really important to be aware of diversity. You know, when I'm booking bills, I'm always trying to encourage the artists I work with to take, if they're, you know, if it's a group of guys, and most male band, to take female artists on the road or have female openers. I'm organizing this benefit concert for Planned Parenthood right now, and it's really important, you know, especially for that charity, but just in general to have a really diverse roster. And I feel like whenever I've been doing these Planned Parenthood benefits for the last 7 or 8 years, and I always try to have the artists like lineup be over half female or more, and of course people of color too. And I think that's just something that we all, you know, like need to be really super hyper aware of. But definitely now when we're choosing like artists to join our roster, it's something that me and the other agent are thinking about. And then definitely from management as well. And, you know, I don't really add a lot of bands these days either, especially since I'm a mom, you know, and my focus is now very different
Yeah.
than when I was building, like a company or, my empire. And so I, like definitely am a lot more fixated on like, okay, like, so if we bring this artist onto the roster, what are they going to be bringing to the roster as diversity wise? And, and it's also just more interesting to work with, music and musicians that challenges you and not just always get stuck in the same genre, which I feel like in the beginning I used to work with a lot of Japanese psych bands, and I feel like I worked with one and then suddenly I was working with 10, and then I was working with one rock band, garage rock band, then I'm working with like 10 garage rock bands. And so now, especially with the management roster, I'm trying to really, diversify the representation of music on there.
Yeah, cool.
And we first heard a bit about you, Michelle, when actually we got in touch with you because of Garotos Suecas, right?
Yeah.
You helped them on like a tour, booking some shows for them in 2009. Yeah. How was that like back then? Do you have a lot of bands like from abroad that was touring in the US?
Yeah. Yeah, I miss those guys. I miss Garotos Suecas, and that was cool meeting them. I met them in New York randomly through my friend. He saw them at a venue in New York and was like, "You have to see this band," and they were in New York I think they were in New York for a while, and then maybe even someone was living in New York, but I can't remember, it was so long because that was like 11 years ago. But anyways, I met them and then just hung out with them and really like, fell in love with them, and they became like family. A lot of the bands I work with definitely become family, and I get really close to them. And I found that I went, probably would still be doing this now, except, since I have a kid, I don't travel as much. But what used to happen with me is I would, get really close to a band I started working with and then kind of travel to where they came from too, and like spend a lot of time. So with Garotos Suecas, I got really close to all of them, and and they really were family, and are still. I talk to a lot of them regularly, and I wish I could see them now. But I went to Brazil and stayed in Brazil for like a month.
Bahia?
I went to Bahia, but I stayed in, and I went to Rio on that trip, but I stayed in Sao Paulo with, I think with the whole band for like a couple of weeks. But I did go to Salvador and Bahia on my own too, which was really fun. But I think I stayed for a whole month, and I tried to learn Portuguese for like the few months leading up to it, and I probably had the vocabulary of like a 5-year-old, and I could, but I was so nervous about using it. I feel like I had some really funny conversations with shopkeepers and like taxi drivers. I had this really funny conversation with a taxi driver one night about Axl Rose being muito doidão. I mean, like being crazy. I'm probably saying it terribly, but yeah. And I remember having these like great conversations with strangers. But then when I was actually hanging out with Garotos Suecas and all their friends, like it was easier to speak in English.
Are you still able to answer like a question in Portuguese?
Probably.
It's been a long time.
Probably it's been a long time, but it was funny. That was a really crazy trip because my friend, so another band I work with, I used to work with a lot of bands from other places, other countries, and I still do. I feel like now my thing, if it was like work, I kind of culturally get hooked into a group of people, is definitely Australia. I work with a lot of Australians now. But around the same time I was working with Garotos Suecas, I started working with this band from Israel named Monotonics. And I went to Israel with them too for a few weeks with my friend Jonathan Tobin, a DJ from New York. And but Jonathan from Monotonics came down to Bahia with me, and we drove around for like 2 weeks together, and then he hung out in São Paulo. And he didn't speak any Portuguese, and so we kind of got into some funny situations where we ended up, I think one night we ended up in a drag bar with some strangers who we didn't know, and one of the drag queens pulled me up on stage and only was talking to me in Portuguese, but asked me who my favorite singer was, like my favorite male singer and female singer. And I understood. So I think she thought I was gonna just be like confused. I think I said, Chibaya was my favorite male singer, and then Rita Lee was like my favorite singer, which I got a chuckle out of her. So I don't, but yeah, some funny photos from that too. But yeah, I probably wouldn't do too well. Rodrigo, who I work with, still doesn't really talk to me in Portuguese. He probably loved to, but he hasn't really like surprised me in that way on the call to see if I can understand. And he's gone very far, great lengths of translating some stuff that I need to look at from Portuguese to English so that I can.
Não, então a surpresa agora, Michelle. A entrevista vai ser em português. I'm kidding. No.
We can do it. And did you know like when you came to Brazil, like when you got to know Rodrigo, what was the circumstance? And did you know Los Hermanos before? Have you heard?
I did. When I went to Brazil, I did not know Rodrigo or Los Hermanos. That came after. I liked a lot of Brazilian music, and then I feel like Grota Suecas introduced me to a lot of great Brazilian music because we would go to record shops. Cessa from the band, we would go to a lot of record stores, and they would show me kind of like buy this, and so it was really cool to kind of have a very hands-on,
curatorship,
as opposed to being like this looks cool. And then Joel, that DJ from Tropicalian Furs, who lived in New York. I think he's still in New York. Me and him were friends through Cessa, because Cessa lived in New York and went and worked at that store. So that's how I got turned on to a lot of Brazilian music, a lot of Tropicalia. And but then Rodrigo kind of came into my life when I moved to LA. I saw him open up probably like when I first moved to LA, like 4 or 5 years ago, open up for Kevin Morby, that musician, and I was at that show. And then I think I was at a birthday party for Kevin, and Rodrigo and I met like when they were cutting cake and stuff. And then we just kind of became friends. And we, it was funny because he just kind of started asking me to get coffee with him as a friend, and we just would get coffee and go on these coffee dates. But then every coffee date, he would start asking me a little bit about my management role in various people's lives. And I think that went on for like a year, and he vetted me really well. And then after a year of just kind of hanging out, and in the back of my mind, I was like, I think he's going to ask me to manage him. He did. And I was really flattered because, Rodrigo is so talented and a really like beautiful artist. But I knew Little Joy, and I had heard of Los Hermanos, but wasn't very super familiar. And then Rodrigo through, his solo work. And then, he had done that song Toyo for Narcos too, which I really liked that show as well. But so I knew about him, in various ways, but then just through getting to know him as a person in LA, became really, a bigger fan.
Yeah, and you mentioned Cessa, and Cessa used to play with Jonathan Gad that we managed to bring a few times to Brazil. So so it was like we got really close friends with Jonathan, like a few times that I went to New York, met him, and he came here like by himself, and sometimes with the full band, like different formats. And how do you get to meet him?
How did I meet Jonathan?
Yeah.
So that's a kind of interesting story too, because I knew Jonathan. Well, I met Jonathan, and I think I was working with Monotonics before Grota Suecas, but Jonathan's like a really good friend of mine still, and we actually keep in touch a lot more now because he's a dad as well. So we have a lot of parenting texts now, which is so crazy thinking about where we came from and where we are now, which we talk about all the time, of just like how bizarre our lives are. We recently just looked at a bunch of photos from the Brazil trip together. But I met Jonathan because Monotonics went on tour with David Berman's band, the Silver Jews, in San Francisco. Probably like, I don't know when that tour was, 2007, 2008. And a friend of mine who is Israeli was living in San Francisco and was like, you have to see my friend's band. They're opening up for Silver Jews. And I was a fan of the Silver Jews. So I was like, sure, I'll go to that show because I think I got in for free or something. And so I got to see Monotonics, which was the craziest band to open up for the Silver Jews because they're so loud. And it was the first time the Silver Jews had toured, like a real tour, a proper tour. And so it was a very monumental night. And then I met them and then just became really close to Jonathan and the whole band. And we we stayed in touch, and then I started working with them. And that band really, I think that band was definitely like Monotonics were definitely like the first band I worked with that had kind of a lot of like success very instantaneously. It was really like fast, and they had such a dynamic live show, and it was, this kind of real like global experience where they got popular all over the world. And I got really close to them, and I went to Mardi Gras with them and spent like a week and a half in New Orleans with them. I toured Israel with them, and then Jonathan and I went on our own trips together, including that Brazil trip as well. Awesome. And I love them. It was really sad. It was really sad when they disbanded, and they kind of didn't even know that they were disbanding. And I think they just announced it at like a show in like Arizona or something. And then they kind of just told me like, oh yeah, this is our last show. And it was so like anticlimactic. They just decided they weren't going to be a band anymore. But the singer had become a dad, and it made sense. But I remember them being really concerned about my company, because they were such an important band for my roster, and they were like, well, you have Ty Segall. I just started working with Ty, and Ty went on tour with them for a little bit.
What year was that?
I'd have to look, but probably like 2000, and probably like a decade ago, like 2010. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
I was working with Ty for about a decade or more. But I remember Ty was pretty young at the time and had just started touring a lot more. And, I think I put Ty on tour with Shonen Knife and Monotonics. And so he was just starting his career, and Monotonics were so sweet, where they were like, we want to make sure that you're okay, and you have another artist who's going to tour a lot. They're like, you have Ty, and Ty did tour a lot. And Ty was the first person I managed. Like, he was the first client I worked with that I got really close to, and then got into artist management through him.
Cool.
And it was a coincidence that like you worked with Garotas Suecas and Monotonics, and then a couple of years later, Jonathan and Sessa started like playing together. Was that a coincidence, or do you have like a?
I think Jonathan and Sessa became friends through me. I think I kind of. And then Jonathan moved to New York, and Sessa was living in New York. And I think they started playing together after I left New York. I can't even really remember, but I'm pretty sure they both met through me. And because I would have the bands play together. Because one of the cool things about Panache, and especially like our South by showcases too, it was just, they're always like really diverse lineups. And I really liked putting bands on bills together that really, musically, sonically don't make any sense together. And, and a band like Garotas Suecas and a band like Monotonics don't make sense together really on a bill. But live-wise, they're both like really vibrant and, amazing. But I feel like they probably played together. And then Jonathan definitely became friends with them through going down there. But I think they all met through me. And I was really excited to see that Jonathan and Sessa were, playing together.
Cool. And when you have Mac DeMarco, like when was the first time you met each other, and how does that like the work relation started?
I feel like I met Mac, maybe it was like 2011 or 2012, whenever rock and roll, like right before Rock and Roll Nightclub came out. But that was cool in the way that it was just very, kind of organic, where I had a kind of like he was an intern, but sort of like assistant named Drew that was Canadian, and he wanted to come down from Calgary and work in the New York office and work in the United States for a while. So he worked in our office for I think 6 months, and he was always playing this like tape that was I think 6 songs, and it was Rock and Roll Nightclub before it had come out. But it was just like, like, oh, this is my buddy. His name's Mac, and he was just playing it over and over again, and I really liked it. And on that recording, Mac sounds a lot like Elvis. And I like Elvis a lot too. But anyways, it really spoke to me, and I really was intrigued by who was this, guy behind these recordings. So Drew introduced us, and we had a very awkward phone call where I think he was kind of skeptical about anyone in the music industry, especially an agent, because he had a bad experience before with his other band, Makeout Videotape. So we kind of had this really like strange 45-minute phone call, and I didn't really know if I was working with him or not. I didn't want to be, I think whenever I've started working with a band, I always never want to be like super music industry or cheesy or, like in any way, I don't know, like promising the world. So I'm just really honest and straightforward. And so I kind of just had a chat with Mac and then didn't really know what was going to happen and what was up. And then I ran into Mike Sniper from Captured Tracks, who, became his label. And Mike told me he was working with Mac. And then I guess, Mac had told him like, oh, I'm working with, this woman, Michelle, she's going to be my agent. And I was like, oh, okay, so we're all working together. And then
so we're actually working.
Yeah, it's all working out. And I never really worked with Captured Tracks before. And so it was, a cool way to be introduced to them too, because they were in New York and I was in New York, and Mac would come down from Montreal a bunch with his girlfriend Kira and, his band. So yeah, I started working with them before the record came out and, like got really close to them, and they, Mac toured a lot, like he toured a lot in his like Volvo that he, I think his mom has now, but we booked some pretty extensive tours where I think he hasn't gone back to certain places driving wise, like since that tour, like 8 or 9, probably 8 years ago. And, I saw him a lot in New York and we just got really close. And then when I started managing him, because it got to the point, like, probably like a year into his career or 6 months in, maybe a year, where he was starting to get more popular. And I think a lot of people were like, dude, you need a manager. And I remember going to Montreal with him for a festival called M for Montreal. And I kind of just was, with a lot of the bands I work with, I kind of did like de facto management, where I kind of like fell into the role of manager, helping them out with all this stuff. And I think because I was up there with Mac, I think he didn't even have a cell phone, and none of his band members had cell phones. But I think Mac didn't even have a cell phone, where I was up there and I was just kind of like helping with all this stuff, not being his manager, but just that I was his booking agent. I happened to be up there. And a lot of people were railing on me because he didn't have a phone. He was really hard to get a hold of. And I was like, I'm just his agent, and then, but his career started to grow and he started getting introduced to all these managers. And I remember it was the night him and Ty Segall opened up. He opened up for Ty Segall at Webster Hall, and I'd set that up, and he found out that I was managing Ty, and so Mac was like, well, why don't you just manage me, because I'm getting introduced to all these managers I don't, really connect with. And so we started having a few conversations and decided it was a good fit. And, and it was awesome.
Was that like the biggest moment for you, or like, because I believe, like, at least for us, it's crazy how, like, after all these years bringing bands, like, we have a close relation with some of the bands that we bring, but it's still like super special, the relation we built with Mac. And like, firstly, because it was the first international act, like a bigger act, and the way that the things went through, like with 2 and Salad Days, it was really like not normal. And how was that for you? Like, because I know the US market also, like you.
Yeah, 2 was definitely that. I remember there was this moment, and it was probably right before I started managing him, but it was this moment where 2 came out and he played CMJ and in New York, when that festival was happening in New York. And I remember, because I used to like try to drag people. I remember like dragging the former owner, Ryan, of Pitchfork to see Mac, and us all watching him together, and people, Mac used to make a lot of funny like jokes, and talking, like strange voices on stage. And I think some people were like, I don't get this, and like, but but it's so brilliant, and his music is so brilliant. He's such a talented singer and performer, and like, and such a charming human being too. And it kind of just speaks to you. But I remember there was this moment at CMJ when he was playing, I think, Music Hall Williamsburg, and I was with Mike from Capture Tracks and their whole team, and it was sold out, like, and it was like, and everyone was singing along, and I think he just got Best New Music on Pitchfork too, and it was just kind of one of these moments where you're like, oh, okay, now I think people are starting to get it, and and it felt very like powerful, and then around that time is when the Mac probably started ask me for help with management too. And Mac, the great thing about Mac is, as you guys know, because you've worked with him and you've stayed friends with him too, is, he's super like personable, and he is, really human, and he loves connecting with people. And, like a lot of times, we just have calls about work, but then we'll just have like, regular conversations. And he really, I think, understands and appreciates everyone that works for him and that is in his life. And, he's pretty straightforward with everything. And when he asked me to manage him, I kind of had been, I didn't want to come across as like cheesy or too pushy. So I just hadn't even put myself up for the job. So when he asked me to do that, I was like, oh, that actually would be really great, because I think we really connect on these other levels. And when you're a manager, you're so much more integral in their career, and you get to like, you have your hands on everything that they do. And with Mac, I think Mac was the first artist I managed, where he kind of has been very trusting of me and kind of been like, okay, I'm going to let you handle everything for me. And, and I feel like that's testament to like our success, together as, manager and artist, and, we're family. And he has gotten to really like, kind of like sit back and be the artist and let me, run things. And I run everything by Mac, of course, but even now, he's running his own label, Mac's record label, but I'm kind of like the behind the scenes project manager running the label. And I'm learning a lot because I'm getting to run, his label. And, and along the way, it's been really cool because as he grew into this sort of, massive, like star, and, in all ways, he's become such a big personality. I think it was a really cool way for my company to grow too, and, learn along the way. And there was just so much fun stuff that we've been able to do together. But, along the way too, there's always been like some really good conversations that me and him have had. Even when I started managing him, he wasn't just like, oh, you should just do this. We had a lot of conversations about like, well, why do you think you'd be good at this? What can you do for me? How can you help me? And I like that, Mac, when I moved to LA, a year later, Mac and his girlfriend moved to LA too. And it was really cool to have him here from New York. But I kind of, just because, we're friends, like helped him with the whole process. He wasn't in LA for most of it. And so I just was at the house, getting all the different inspections done. I went shopping with them when they looked at houses and stuff with a real estate agent, and it was really cool to be part of that whole process. And, and it was cool to have somebody I work with buy a house, and own it, and, and be able to like have kind of more solid ground, in the music industry, which I think is kind of rare and hard, especially these days when there's so much competition. But, Mac's someone who I think really fully understands like how lucky he is and fortunate he is to be in the position he is as a musician. And he also, really respects everyone around him and is always trying to help everyone, like all the other younger musicians he works with too, and give them music advice too that maybe he didn't get early days in his career as well. So yeah, it's cool. It's like a really good open like form of communication, which I think is what you kind of strive to have in a relationship like, that in the music industry.
And when we managed to interview him for Balaclava Digital, we also mentioned about like how, in a way, it's humble, like the way he, like first time in Brazil, like he didn't come with even sound guy, like it was just a band. Second time was Joe only, and then like Lollapalooza, of course, it was like a bit bigger, but not too big, crew. And like it was, so during the whole time, and also like the decision of being like super extensive tours, like how did you handle like how's the conversation to decide like how long the tour is going to be, and the crew, or like if you have to like, Mac, for this show you need to have a bigger crew, something like that?
Yeah, well, we so for some shows like in the UK when we've played bigger venues, we've hired like LD, like a lighting director, and maybe we'll get someone else to do monitors. Now he has like a monitors, Roberto tours with him for monitors, and we have like a merch person who's also now assistant TM Amiel, and Centarpia has been our road tour manager for years now, and he's amazing. But in the beginning, yeah, it was just Mac and the band, and Mac driving. Like I think the first Brazil trip, I went down there with him, or the second one, I can't remember.
The first one,
yeah. And I was down there for a long time, and then I came down for, I think, another South American trip, but I didn't make it to Brazil. But where I was kind of there as like sort of like tour manager as well. And I think too, what we learned in the beginning, especially coming from like these, Mac has a punk background as well, where like when you're touring in countries where it's kind of expensive to get down there, and you don't know what the exact outcome is going to be financially. It's better to be a little more conservative. And, and he also really liked the human experience of, getting to hang out with people one-on-one after shows. It's kind of like why Mac was on the road a lot of times. He really loved connecting with fans. I remember, I think I sold merch on a lot of those Brazilian initial parties. But there's a couple of times where I was like in the corner of a venue selling merch, and then I had literally, I think one time I had like a plastic bag of cash, where it, but I don't know. I think the one thing about that tour was just the first tour was, we didn't have enough time to really hang out in cities. I think when we were in Rio, we were doing an interview and they got to go to the beach for an hour, but that was it. And got to run around, like the band got to run around very excitedly on the beach. And then it was like, okay, we got to go to the venue. And, but they really wanted to pack in as many countries as possible. And I think we did do some smaller shows. And when we did Lollapalooza, I remember the promoters from C3 kind of asking our advice about touring in Brazil and other parts of South America, because they noticed we had done it more extensively, which most people hadn't. But, I like had a connection to Brazil from Grutas Suecas and from going to all these smaller places in Brazil on my own. And so for me, and I think Mac definitely has the same interest when he goes to a country to see, more of the country. And so we like the idea of kind of doing these smaller shows and then working with promoters like you guys to kind of figure out how to do it, as opposed to sometimes, you get a promoter that's just like, well, this is just how I do a tour, and these are the expenses. And, if you add anything, you'll probably just lose a bunch of money, or, it's not worth doing it. But, when you work with people that want to put in the extra work to make all these pieces fit together, and Mac was definitely willing, we've done this before where sometimes, he might tour with a slightly bigger crew. And when I say bigger crew, that means, 3 crew members or 4 members max, like nothing more than that, but we might downsize by a person or two so that he can go to Japan and tour Japan extensively. And I've done a few solo tours where he's been able to do that. But, a lot of times we try to do the band. And, when you're jumping on a bunch of planes, which when we're in, I think when we're in Brazil, all we ate was pão de queijo. You guys just
pão de queijo,
yeah, you just give us the cheesy bread. I remember Pete, who's now home shake, he got obsessed with it because we were just on the go all the time, where we were just eating in airports and we didn't have time to really explore because we wanted to try to fit in all these cities. But then the irony of that is we didn't really get to explore that much because we're on the plane so much. So I think when Mac went back, it was like, okay, let's try to have a little more time here and there. But, Mac, is definitely, someone who really loved, especially in the early years, really loved being on the road and loved exploring and seeing new places. So I think that led to how we booked tours. And, we did a lot of international traveling, and I did a lot of traveling with them, and, went to Iceland with them too. And, in various parts of Europe. And, but, I think South America was probably some of the craziest touring that we've all done together, and super fun. But, now, and I think that happens when you've been on the road for as long as Mac has been, almost a decade, where you decide to kind of do okay, so maybe quality over quantity, where you can kind of do fewer shows. And, but I mean, he still likes, I think he wanted, I think we mentioned this to you, he originally wanted to try to figure out a driving tour.
Brazil?
To Brazil.
Yeah, I remember that, first time, 2014, I came to was a huge success, 3 very cool shows. And then after that, you told us, Mike wants to come back next year, 2015, and he wants to tour driving across the country. And we were like, okay, we have some road issues here in Brazil, but we're gonna try to make it possible.
I remember when I went to Bahia with Jonathan, just some of the crazy roads we were on, and I feel too now, with a lot of artists I work with, we kind of realize that 3 weeks maximum is what you should do for sanity and mental health. So sometimes it's hard to pack in all these different territories in one tour and do it, sanely. And then, when your setup gets more complicated, you can't really, Mac and the band kind of have expanded outside of doing the whole fly and play in the same day. That's really stressful when you really depend on a sound check and stuff. So you start to add dates for travel and then resting. And so it's harder to kind of pack everything in. but that, that's of course a nice natural way to evolve as musicians. Like I feel like in the beginning too, Mac was always like, they were all always sleeping on floors, and then they evolved into hotels. And then, Mac didn't tour in a bus, like a Nightliner bus, until recently. It was always, he liked using the 15 passenger van and trailer.
Yeah.
They didn't want to have to always like get on the road afterwards and go to the next destination in a bus. But slowly it's kind of evolved. But even like a year, I think it was like 2 years ago, him and Kira went on a solo tour through like the southern part of the United States, just Mac and Kira, no tour manager, like a couple years ago, pretty recently, which was pretty crazy.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And like, I imagine that Mac has opened a lot of paths for Panache in a way, like because like new venues, new contacts, booking, and also management, like the sync licensing stuff. Like, how did you try to apply the stuff that you learned through Mac with other artists? I know that like each case is a different scenario, but how did you put your knowledge into it? Like,
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Like, because, with Mac, I definitely, because I think, I managed Ty, but Mac definitely was saying yes to a lot more things than Ty was. Ty's kind of always been a little more reserved with his career too, which I completely understand and respect as well. But Mac was kind of more willing to be on the road more, travel more places internationally. Like he kind of said yes to a lot more opportunities, playing more festivals and stuff too, which always leads to meeting new people. Mac, I think I went when I went to Laneway in Australia with Mac for the first couple of times. That was amazing because, you have a bunch, like 15 or 20 bands on the road together, and getting on planes and flying everywhere at the same time. And so I met a lot of people that changed my life. That's where I met Jody from, Paula's management, Spinning Top, and we eventually became friends right away, and then started sharing an office together in LA, which was really cool because I wasn't planning on getting an office immediately when I was in LA. And then, like through Mac, people contacted me and about, like we started working with like a certain publisher together. And then I, had never worked with them. And so when another artist I work with is looking to sign a deal with a publisher, maybe I'll send the music to them too, which is really cool. And then I think just, like, I can't remember maybe Ty was the first artist I had on Coachella, but Max definitely probably played more, the majority of festivals, at like first time festivals for a lot of artists. I mean, Monotonics definitely did. They were all festival bands, but now it's cool because Mac, Ty, King Gizzard, a lot of the management artists have been on a lot of these festivals too, but that kind of expands your world. And then Mac was the first artist I had at Red Rocks, which was really cool in Colorado. And he opened up for Tame Impala, and I went to that show. And then we were like, okay, when you're next album, let's do our own show. And we did, and we went back, again. And then, and then I booked King Gizzard there because I became friends with the promoter and the people there. And we, and it is just, kind of cool and to have, these shows that do really well in this iconic, kind of one of the most famous places in the, in the United States. But same thing with, Mac in New York, where we kind of just did a lot of new, exciting things together, like bigger venues, but at the same time, Mac also kind of, I feel like his music and sound, it resonates in smaller, settings too with fans. So there are certain things that we just kind of decided not to do, that we would just do like 4 or 5 nights in one place instead of doing like a massive venue, because that's just kind of like what connected with Mac better. I mean, we did some of the venues we did in the UK were some of the biggest venues I've been to, like when we played the Roundhouse and did, multiple nights at the Roundhouse or Brixton Academy. And I think in the early days, Mac didn't want to do a lot of really massive rooms because he really wanted to connect with the fans. But then he got more comfortable with it and, and had fun with it. And then, and then when you expand the crew and that's going to sound good and you're not going to have a crazy time trying to make, a room that's, like a cylinder sound. Yeah. Good. Then, you get more confident and, and Mac became more confident as an artist. That always helps too. But then the thing I like about Mac though, is he's always kind of down to dial it back. We were supposed to have this tour, like a solo tour that we had announced with Jonathan Richman on the West Coast through like really small rural towns in California. like Big Sur and Santa Cruz happen, and we keep rescheduling it because of the pandemic. But I love that, you know, Mac could play headline Red Rocks, or, you know, headline multiple nights at Brixton Academy or other, you know, other big venues. But then also, you know, he's going to do like a solo tour with Jonathan Richman in the woods. Like, you know, I love that. And that was one of my most fun tours to book in the last couple of years. So it's been sad that we've had to keep rescheduling it, but hopefully it'll happen.
Yeah. And we also talked to Mac about like how like a lot of bands after him and Tame Impala, they were kind of like a ripoff of their music. So it's crazy how nowadays you listen to playlists that sound a lot like Mac DeMarco. So like, did you get like reached out by some of these bands like, hey, please book me?
Yeah, there's definitely like, you know, I feel like Mac especially kind of created his own sound, you know, like that guitar sound, and you know, and even like his style of dress, you know, and the thing is a lot of people think, you know, Mac's been called like slacker rock and all this stuff, and Mac's like so hardworking, you know, he's just been able to perfect having this air of ease, you know, to his whole career, but at the same time he takes it all very seriously and is like really hardworking and dedicated. You know, but I think there's this level of like the appearance of being very like chill, you know, so like there's like kind of I feel like there's been this curve of musicians that kind of dress like that has shown up and have that like, you know, that definitely that guitar sound, and, you know, and he's, you know, I remember one time when we were in Australia for Laneway, he was really into wearing like overalls, and everyone in I think it was like the Dungarees, but everyone in Australia that were showing up at his shows, they all look like Mini Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been, you know, it's been interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of musicians that sound, you can definitely tell we're influenced by Mac, that are, you know, are out there, and they, you know, they reach out to, and, you know, he's been really like supportive of a lot of his fans. You know, I feel like he has given his personal information out to a lot of people, and then had to dial that back a little bit. But, you know, I feel like I engage with a lot of people I try to respond to everyone on email, and like listen to what people send me to, and communicate. So me and him definitely, I feel like, have gotten ourselves pretty deep into some communication with people online that reach out and share stuff. But you meet cool people that way too sometimes. So
cool. And like regarding like we're ending the interview, I want to ask you first, like regarding working with Bikini Kill, how did that came up with?
So that was such an honor, and I think Kathleen Hanna, she wrote me an email and was very, very mysterious about what she wanted to talk about, and because no one knew they were getting back together, but she just told me she wanted to talk to me about a big project, and she wanted to meet up, and then she told me she already knew where my address and my office was, and she'd done all this research. And then we met up and we had coffee, and it was really cool because we chatted a lot, and she knew a lot about me. She knew I had a zine, and she knew I had more of a like punk rock background. And so she, kind of similar to Rodrigo, had done a lot of research on me before we met up, and she knew a lot about me. She knew my office address and stuff. And you know, and told me that Bikini Kill were gonna reunite, and she was like, would you be interested? And, you know, of course, amazing. And, you know, and also just such the perfect time. I mean, now it's even like a crazier time, but, you know, she was just saying that how their songs would really like reverberate with like, really like connect with people now, because people are so angry at so much stuff, you know, and as a group of female musicians, you know, like that, you know, the music industry was a very different world then, you know, there's still not enough equity now, but, you know, I feel like it's been really cool to have them headline Riot Fest in Chicago, you know, like an all-female group headline Riot Fest. And, you know, and that was such an amazing thing, you know, to be part of. And we had such a great year planned, because so, you know, I got the job. She was interviewing a couple other people, but they hired me, which was really cool and awesome. And then I really connected with them. And so they asked me if I would book them worldwide. So I've been booking them worldwide for the last like year and a half. But unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, everything keeps getting moved. too, but it's been really cool because I was the one booking them and for all the European dates that we announced, and and we would love to bring them to South America down the line too. That was something in the works, but that was I've never had shows sell out that fast. I think King Gizzard with Red Rocks, we sold that out pretty fast too, but with Bikini Kill, it was this whole thing of like our robots or like bots getting the tickets and stuff, but it was really like that many fans just wanted like to buy. I mean, I feel like the first couple shows in LA we sold out in like 10 minutes, like 8,000 tickets, and then we announced 2 more shows.
Wow.
It's been a while, but we sold like 16,000 tickets in LA in like a couple of days, and but like where the first show would sell out in like 10 minutes. But yeah, I was going to say that it was one of the craziest things to watch, and I learned a lot about ticketing through that too, just how to like kind of delay scalpers getting it and doing all these different things through like Ticketmaster and other ticketing companies to delay the bots buying tickets and whatnot. But it was it was crazy. People were getting pissed off because they weren't getting tickets, but it was just like there was just such a outcry. I had so many people I know from Australia and other parts of the world that flew in for some of those shows too, which is really cool.
Yeah, some Brazilian friends went to New York concerts.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. It was crazy. Like it was all over. And is the idea to keep going on tour?
Yeah, we want to
Bikini Kill. Yeah, we
want to do new things and actually tour. We had like a bunch of dates that we announced in the Northwest and on the East Coast, like actual touring dates. And we had all these European dates, like 2 European tours and 2 or 3 US tours. So, and they've all been rescheduled for the end of, most of them for the end of next year, mid to end of next year, depending on the territory. But the idea is to kind of expand on that for sure. Like, I think that for me, I feel like 2020 was going to be a really big year for, like a lot of the artists I work with. And for me too, as an agent and as a manager, there was a lot of really exciting things that I got to plan. And so it's been very tragic to have to reschedule those and not know if they'll actually be happening when they are rescheduled, hopefully. So like, trying to stay positive. But the Bikini Kill tours, have been the most probably insane to have to reschedule because people have been waiting so long, for these dates too. And there was a lot of organization that, went into that. But, like the idea is still to tour and, they're eager to play and, hopefully, some more, I know they've been putting out new merch and everything and, maybe some other new stuff will happen too. But cool. Yeah, they're like the most amazing group of women to work with. And it's just been really fun being a part of all that. And just, it's, I'm so flattered, that, I get to work with them and that they trusted me to do that. And then after I did that tour, to get the opportunity to book them worldwide has been so insane and, and really cool. My son got to go to Riot Fest and got to be like backstage with Bikini Kill when he was like 4 months old, I think. Yeah. It was really, really cool. The first time we put him on a plane was to take him to this festival. He was like he was on the stage. They got us a little, their drum tech is my friend, Guy Bice, and he gave us a little area on the side of the stage and we had the headphones on my son and he got to hang out like on the stage to the side watching the band with another baby, which was cool.
Yeah. So your son is now
how old is
16?
How old is he?
Yeah, 16 months.
16 months.
Yeah, 16 months. It's crazy.
Yeah. I know. I have like a 2 year and 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah, daughter now. And how is that for you? Like, how does that change for you? Like, how being able to harmonize, conciliate all the panache, motherhood, and social isolation with your kid right now? How is that? Are you being able to manage it all?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, as I'm sure you having 2 kids, you can you understand it's crazy. I feel like the best thing about the pandemic is getting to have all this extra time at home with our son. The silver lining in all of this is just like, you're in the same situation where those first few years is such a special and like integral period in their lives. And so to be so present, and we were really present anyways in the beginning. We didn't have any help. And we only got outside help. We hired a nanny in the beginning of the year, but she only worked with us for a few weeks and then the pandemic hit. So really like Lawrence, my son, it's crazy, but I've kind of been with him 24/7 for like his whole life, which is so cool. And so we're really close. And, he's really close with his dad, and, his dad is a musician and does music publicity, and, has been able to work from home too. And so with the pandemic, we just juggle, it all. Like we, like I get a lot done when he's napping. Chris is like, his dad, my boyfriend is watching him right now while I do this interview, but, we kind of just juggle, and he's a really good kid. Like he's very positive and happy and like, kind, and, you can kind of already see so much of his personality shining through. And so, it's been, he's been pretty, I think easy as a child at home, but I feel like I just juggle. It's good being my own boss because I just juggle what I can do like early in the morning or late at night or during the day when he's napping. And then if I have stuff to do in the afternoon, Chris will watch him, when I do meetings. And, now with this pandemic, there's a lot of Zoom meetings. And so it's harder, like when you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can't really like have the baby, but sometimes, I'll be doing a call, like with my headphones on, like walking around and stuff. But most of the time I just kind of juggle when he takes these epic long naps, like these 2.5 hour long naps. So I get a lot of work done too. And, and fortunately right now, the booking agency, I'm rebooking a lot of tours, but it's not that super busy. And I, just am focusing more on the management stuff, and I can, with the management stuff, I can definitely balance and juggle everything, more with the schedule of my schedule with, my son's schedule. And I'm really fortunate where all the artists I work with have been very, very supportive of that. Like Rodrigo knows we have these like business meetings he calls it the nap chat, when Lawrence is napping, we'll have our like, talks, and, and I think Mac was really, really happy that I expanded my whole world and started a family. Mac wanted to be godfather to our kid. I think Mac's godfather to like 20 kids or something. But
he offered my kid to.
Yeah. Did you say yes?
But I have chosen Fernando before, so I hadn't said no. Mac Fernando is already the godfather.
He's godfather to 20 or 25 kids. It's funny. But yeah, like I work with a lot of musicians that have been really, really supportive of me starting a family and really understanding. So there's not that sort of like pressure. And then I think now when I take on a new artist, we traveled, like I said, we traveled before the pandemic. We traveled to see Bikini Kill play with Lawrence. And then, he's been at a Mac show. He saw Mac play in LA. And, he's been to a few other concerts. And, we were planning on taking him to, I think, Red Rocks with King Gizzard and some other stuff. But, and he really likes music too, which is really cool. So it'd be interesting to see how he will interact when he gets to go out, again to a concert. Because he really, both of his parents love music, and he really loves music, and he loves people. He really loves socializing with others. So that's been kind of the sad thing about the pandemic, is we can't really socialize with other people because we've been really strict. But it's been great because I, have a lot less, I feel like there's a lot less things going on with the booking agency, which has allowed me to have much more time, with him. And I just, have a much better hold on things in my schedule, because of that. And I, it's just really rewarding to get to every moment, of his life, see every word. Cause I think when we were going to have a nanny, I was worried I was going to miss, something. And, and now, it's just us. And so I've seen everything, and I think it'll create a much better foundation for him in the future too. And hopefully from this pandemic, I don't know what it's like in Brazil, but hopefully I think in the US, I know a lot of women have had to leave their jobs, unfortunately, and be at home with their kids. But I also think a lot of people are getting a better understanding of what it's like juggling children and having a career, because I think a lot of dads are having to experience that too. And so I think now people are a little more accepting if the child runs through the business meeting, and people are communicating more about what's going on in their personal lives and stuff. And so I think that's really, really cool, where hopefully people will be more open to talk about what's going on in their households, as well as, the professional life. Because, my whole way of connecting with everyone I work with has been through, getting to know everyone as, people and having that like mutual respect and understanding and, you know, like love too, like with all the artists I work with. And so it's.
But yeah, I guess that's it, Michelle. We loved it, and thanks again for like it's super special like having you as our first like proper agent, like to get the experience. And you've like we're really thankful that you treated us as well. Like you were like a super comprehensive about like it was like our first major thing as a booking agency, as a promoter. So yeah, it's just like it's super cool to work with you every time, and it's cool that like you need to come back to Brazil right now.
I really, I mean, when this is all better, you know, like, yeah, I mean, I think there was talk that we were going to try to go to some of the South American tour that we were planning, you know, for, you know, another band, and, you know, that will happen. You just down the line. But yeah, I think one of the places I really miss the most is Brazil. And Chris went to Argentina with me and Mac, and really wants to go back too. And I'd love to take Lawrence down there. And I miss all the Grota Suecas folks too. So yeah, I'd love to see you guys. Yeah. And you guys, you know, like, thank you for being so supportive too. And I love that I've helped you guys grow, and that Mac has been part of that too.
Sure. We owe you a sandwich at Estadão. We'll take you there again, because Mac asked us.
Yeah, I feel like if you could send him a sandwich on dry ice, he would love.
Yeah. We're doing free sponsorship for Estadão like all the time. But yeah,
I'll never forget the image of Mac, like almost like making out with that sandwich at like 1 a.m. Brazil is a very special place in my heart, and I can back. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah, talk soon then. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice one.
Stay safe.
You too.